I decided to talk to you this evening about the finds at the Giza pyramid, which is about a week, or maybe a week and a half since it was they had a big meeting. The scientists, I think it was on the 15th of March, actually, the Italian scientists, and then about a week later, on the equinox, actually, they broadcast to the world their findings. And it's been extremely controversial. There are some people who think, isn't this fantastic? Isn't this brilliant? And others go, what a lot of baloney. This is what do they call it? False news. This is lies. Anyway, so I was very interested, as I think most astrologers are. And the reason why I think astrologers are interested is because astrology comes from, it's a very ancient esoteric science, and it comes basically from at least Egypt, if not Atlantis, if not before. And I've had a deep interest in Egypt and have travelled there only once, but never forgotten. Anyway, so I was kind of watching things that were passing me by on social media with all the artists' impressions going, oh yeah, what's that about? But then I had a very profound experience on Sunday during one of our earth healing services in the temple. And I was shown and reminded that I'd had an Egyptian incarnation where I'd worked in in the sacred capacity in the temples there. And I had a vision of the holy ones when they first arrived in Egypt after the collapse of Atlantis. And I suddenly went, oh my goodness me, they're talking about what's been on social media for the last week. So then I started having a look at all the various explanations of the astronomy and so on, the scientific unearthings. Anyway, what I wanted to do tonight was speak for about a half an hour about the theosophical or the esoteric underpinnings for Egypt and the Giza Plateau, and then stop and have a bit of a break, and then go on and have a look at some of the things that have been unearthed. And we'll just see where our discussion takes us. If I can find the... yeah, so hopefully you can see the slideshow there now. And as I said, the first half an hour or so will basically be theosophical and the esoteric underpinnings, and the last however long we take will be about what they found. So it's a bit of an overview. Egypt is very strongly connected with the fourth ray, and we know that the fourth ray is the ray of humanity's soul. And we also know that in ancient Egypt, there were ancient mystery schools. And esoterically, we know that the Temple of Ascension is connected to Luxor in Egypt. So things that are happening in Egypt are often associated with the soul impulse of humanity. And then I'm going to have a look at the equinox chart, which we looked at last week, I think. Yeah, last week, but I've cast the chart previously. When I looked at it, I cast it for Canberra, I think. So I've cast the chart for Cairo because I wanted to see what it looked like from the Giza perspective. I'm going to talk about the fact that I believe we have starry DNA. We come from the stars. We have our ancestry is from civilizations that are wiser and higher and beyond the human. Talk very briefly about Atlantis and Egypt and the root races. I'll talk a little bit about the Giza Plateau and the pyramids and the Sphinx. And then the last couple of bits will be what is it that they found that underneath, they think they found, and where could it possibly have come from, if there's anything there. Okay, so we know that we are going through a period of very strong ascension. And ascension is fourth ray, and it is the ray of harmony, beauty and art, but it's also harmony through conflict. Well, we understand the conflict, we see it everywhere, and we're striving to find our balance. And something about the beauty and the art reminds me of the ancient wisdom and the beauty and the art of the outdoor temples all over Egypt. So this is the equinox chart, which we talked about last week, and I'm just going to get my little highlighter out here. And you might notice that this time I've done it for Luxor. Okay. Now, esoterically, from an esoteric astrologist's perspective, if you're thinking about the fourth ray, then you think about the sign of Aries. And we talked about that as one of the stelliums. Yeah. So we have these 4 planets in Aries, the Sun, and Venus, and Mercury, and Chiron. But if you think about it from an Egyptian perspective, well, Mercury, looks like the person with the hat on, is actually connected to one of the most revered teachers from ancient Egypt. And this is the thrice great Hermes, who was the, father of the very ancient civilization. And in the modern lingo, we think of Mercury and the winged messenger, but on an Egyptian perspective, we're talking about Thoth Hermes. Yeah. So we have Thoth Hermes in the chart there, and we have the retrograde. Remember, we spoke last week about the retrograde and how it asks us to look deep within. And so I look at this now and I think, okay, well, we're being directed to look deep within Egypt, yeah, because the ancient wisdom teacher, Thoth Hermes, may have something to reveal. Yeah? And then Mercury, which is a sacred planet, sits with Venus, which is also a sacred planet. And both of these sacred planets ask us to look within. Yeah. And of course, that's what's happening. All of a sudden, the technology's been able to look deep within the Giza Plateau. And Venus, interestingly, is connected to humanity's, it's the soul planet. And it's as I have a higher self and a personality, so humanity have a soul which is connected to the planet Venus. So I look at these and this conjunction of 2 of the sacred planets, the sacred feminine, you might say, Venus, which is also associated with the search for truth, and the ancient teacher, Thoth Hermes, who says, look within. But then so we talked about this last time, but when I looked at the chart from Luxor, I couldn't help but notice there's a different ascendant, and the ascendant is 28.5 degrees Gemini. Now, one of the fixed stars, Betelgeuse, is located at this position at 29 degrees of Gemini. And this is a huge red star that sits in the right shoulder in the constellation of Orion and was previously known to the Egyptians as the god Osiris. And this star is probably one of the most blessed and fortunate stars in the sky. From when linked to a chart, it promises success without complications. So I think, and of course the ascendant, that's the arrow that you can see, always directs us to the point of growth. The ascendant's got a great deal to do with not only the body, our physical bodies, or in this case, the physical Giza. Well, I haven't done this for Luxor, but there'd be very little difference between the Giza Plateau. It's about, is it 600 something like that. Anyway, so we have Betelgeuse, and it is one of it's a second magnitude star. So it's not an archangelic star, but it's a second magnitude star. Okay. And then, of course, we did talk last week about Mercury, Thoth Hermes, and and Venus. And Venus is associated with the Sabian symbol of a triangle with wings. And I'll pick that up a little bit later on. And we talked about the moon down here. I've lost my doodle, sorry. Oh, there it is. There's the moon. The moon in Sagittarius, and the Sabian symbol for that is a lamp of physical enlightenment at the left temple. So I think, okay, well, there's some enlightenment that's connected to the ancient teachers of Egypt and the potential for success going forward with Betelgeuse if we look within. Yes, so I think that's all I wanted to say about the chart for the moment. Zachary, did you have anything else you wanted to add to this Luxor view of the equinox chart?
Well, not really. I think we talked about it extensively last week, so I'll leave it for now.
Yep. Okay. All right. So let's go on to the next slide. Whoops, I've left one of those marks there. Let me get rid of that. So that's what I was just telling you about Betelgeuse conjunct the ascendant with promise of success, which we could only hope that there will be more revelations to come out of the Giza Plateau. One of the things associated with Mercury, the planet Mercury, is a woman's hat with streamers blown by the east wind. That's the Sabian symbol. And I think about the east wind and I think about Archangel Raphael. And Archangel Raphael's associated with revealing truth. So I'm hoping that there's some truth that will be revealed. Okay. Now, if we think about the Giza Plateau, the scientists would say, oh, well, it's only, you know, I don't know, a few hundred years old, or maybe 1,000 or two, whereas esoterically we say, well, it's at least, you know, 12,000, 13,000 years back now, and maybe a whole lot further. We really don't know how far back goes civilization in some form in Egypt, but at least as far back as Atlantis. Now, of course, what happened is with the collapse of the continent of Atlantis that occurred over, well, I think it was over a century or more. It was a long time. There was a restoration or a recalibration, if you like, of the best of the Atlantean civilizations into different parts of the world. And specifically, we're talking about the Levant here and Egypt and the Middle East. And the ancient wisdom teachers transferred the best of that civilization from the fourth root race. We would say at least 10,500 BC, roughly speaking, when we'd say, okay, well, this may well have been the final sinking of Atlantis, which we know in the modern lingo as the flood. In the Christian lingo, I think it's referred to as the fall. Whereas from an esoteric level, we'd say, okay, there's a relocation of the flame, and it's come into many places around the planet, into Egypt, but also India, Tibet, China, South America, Australia. And the same thing will happen again as we transition to the sixth root race. And we don't know when that will be, somewhere in the future. One of the things that we do know, because we have the end of the dinosaurs, is that we have major cataclysm and upheaval as civilizations and root races complete and others begin. And whether such upheaval and cataclysms is associated with the pole shift, where the stars appear as if they're falling from the heavens. But we need to be alert to the fact that these big changes don't happen without enormous geophysical upheaval. So let's talk about the Venusian and the Syrian entourage. So sometime around circa 10,500 BC, the motherships came, but not just from Atlantis. They came also from Venus and from Sirius and no doubt from other star systems. And they came to inaugurate the new epoch and to bless and to anchor the flame. Now, anchoring the flame's a little bit like planting a seed. And I couldn't begin to know what that would feel like from the hierarchy's perspective, but I have had some experience with it through my travels around the world when I've been working with earth healing services in different countries. And so I know that the anchoring of a flame is a very precious thing that occurs and then can take however long it takes to take root. Anyway, to get back to the story, we've had the flame lords, the lords and ladies from Venus, from Sirius, from Atlantis, come all around the planet. But one of the myths that has stayed with humanity is that that this was Noah was the only one who survived, and he built a ship, and he ended up at Mount Ararat. Although some would say, and Mount Ararat is in the eastern part of Turkey, not far from the border of Syria. Although others would say, oh no, he ended up in the Taurus Mountains. But I was listening to an archaeologist. I've listened to a few different archaeologists over the last week or so, and it was one of them, and do you think I can remember who it was, who was saying, actually, one of the, and he didn't use the word flame, that's an esoteric word, but what he said was, well, maybe it didn't go into Mount Ararat or the Taurus Mountains, maybe it went into the Giza Plateau, which was known in ancient times as the Ros Tor, the Bull Mountain. Anyway, but of course there are other places. There's the Göbekli Tepe, the very large, they think one of the largest ancient civilizations that they've been working on in Turkey. There's Petra in Jordan. We have lots of evidence of the ancients in Samaria and the Mesopotamians in Iraq. And of course we have the ancient Egyptian civilizations that are being unearthed in Giza. And the archaeologists, if they look at it on a purely physical level, well, they're looking at old buildings and tunnels and caves. Whereas if we look at it from an esoteric level, we go, okay, yes, but these were inaugurated as a result of enormous catastrophe and the end of an epoch. And they've been inaugurated by the Lord of the World, who's certainly had a governorship role over humanity during the age of Pisces, and I think in these early stages, I don't know how much longer the Lord of the World stays with us through the age of Aquarius. And eventually, by the time we get to the age of Capricorn, we will have the Lady of the World. Yeah, and the age of Aquarius, whether there's a mixture of both of these, I'm not quite sure. But the Lady of the World is definitely will be on the great throne, the Lady of Shambhala, when we get to the age of Capricorn, which will be about 2,100 and whatever it is, 76 years, something like that. So in my travels, I've been very fascinated, and I haven't been to the Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Nor have I been to Petra, although I was very close to Petra in my travels. But there's something that calls me to these old places, and they're not just ruins. You know, they are anchoring points and seeding points where the holy ones from beyond Earth and indeed beyond our solar system there's evidence that they have been there, and great civilizations have risen and fallen. I did this map here of from the Levant and the Eastern Mediterranean, just to sort of point it out to you, the various places. So, for instance, here's the Taurus Mountains. Some people say that's where Noah's Ark ended up. Others say, no, it was over here in Mount Ararat. Yeah, and then we have the Sumerians and the Mesopotamian people. And then down here in Jordan, we have Petra. And down the bottom, I can't quite, I've got something in the way here. Beg your pardon. Anyway, further, right down the bottom there is the Giza Plateau. Yeah. And when I look at this, what strikes me about this most ancient part of Earth, where there has been very deep concentration of ancient wisdom, is that this is a region in absolute chaos and war, and some of the deepest hatred from humanity to humanity has occurred and is still occurring in this region. And so what started out as blessings and inaugurations of a new epoch and a new era certainly got a long way to go before we end up in a higher consciousness. There's a lovely image of the flame lords and the ladies descending. And of course, the traditions of ancient India and into Tibet, another one of the anchoring points. Yeah, and I think it was it Anthony, one of the archaeologists? No, it was Robert. I've given them mixed up. There's one of them's called Robert, and I've got a whole list of links that I've been looking at that I've got at the end of this slideshow. And he spoke about the fact that the Giza Plateau used to be known as Ross Tau, or the Bull Mountain. And when I think of the Bull Mountain, I think of the sign of Taurus, and I think of the sign of Taurus as being the sign of enlightenment. So there's various things associated with Taurus. It is one of the signs associated with the path of spiritual aspirancy. It is one of the signs associated with the deep work at the beginning of the path of discipleship, and particularly around the probationary or the first initiation. And then at a higher turn of the spiral, Taurus is associated with enlightenment. And of course, in the ancient times, the Apis bull was sacred, and the god of creation. I don't know whether his name's pronounced Ptah or Ptah. I'm not sure, but it was purported to be an incarnation of Osiris. And of course, the Egyptians were very strongly connected to the stars, and I believe this is because they know and they knew that their ancestors came in ships of light from the stars, not, as the Bible tells us, in a wooden ship made by Noah. Yeah? And we also know that they were deeply involved in the funerary rites and passages, and that's where one of my very first incarnations that I uncovered was about the funerary ceremonies. Yes, so very, very ancient culture that I think is integrally connected to spiritual aspirancy, discipleship, and enlightenment at different stages of human development. Now, there's a beautiful one that says categorically this is the reason why the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, were so fascinated and their culture was so integrally connected to the constellations in the heavens, because they're aware of the visitation of the flame lords and ladies. And it was something that I heard about in this last week that said that the actual language of hieroglyphics came much, much later than ancient Egypt, or even the middle kingdoms of Egypt. It was much more, maybe it was the intermediate or the new kingdom, but in ancient Egypt, there was no such thing as hieroglyphs. And they know this because of excavations that they've done in certain places. And of course, Betelgeuse was the vehicle for Osiris, their pharaoh, their god, their father, yeah, on the right shoulder of Orion. And there it is when you look at the equinox chart and cast it for Egypt, remembering that the equinox chart lasts for a 3-month period from the 20th of March through till the 20th of June. So I would imagine there'll be a great deal of exploration around the veracity or otherwise of what has been found beneath the Giza Plateau in this 3-month period. Another one of the fixed stars that was significantly important to the ancient Egyptians was the fixed star Sirius. And this was because at that time, the fixed star Sirius would rise at the time that the Nile was about to flood. And so therefore the ancient Egyptians associated Sirius with prosperity, with food, with protection. And I know when I've meditated on Sirius in more recent times, in the current incarnation, I've been told very clearly that this star, known as the Shining One or the Blue Star, and the home of the Sirian hierarchy, sends out the light of hope to the disciples so that they can radiate this light of hope to humanity. Yeah. Okay, just a few images here. There's the thrice great Hermes, Mercury in the old in how we refer to Mercury. We think of Mercury as the planet Mercury. The Egyptians thought of Mercury as their teacher, the progenitor, the very, very ancient anchoring point. And of course, you see the mummy underneath. I couldn't help but put in this more recent image. It looks a bit sort of medieval to me, of a Mercury, completely different from Thoth, but you know, we have several thousand years in difference there. But what strikes me about Mercury there is the scale that he gives us all, and the wings on his head. I have another image here of Mercury from a more modern take, holding the light, the light aloft. Yes, and as you look at those three images, I was looking at that sort of medieval picture of Mercury, and I suddenly remembered the Sabian symbol from the equinox chart, which said a woman's hat with streamers blown by the east wind. I thought, hang on a minute, are they talking about Mercury? Is the ancient wisdom from the old civilization going to be revealed under the interaction of Archangel Raphael, who brings truth? And of course, Mercury is one of the androgynous signs, not really male, not really female. Anyway, that's just the way my mind went when I was pondering that Sabian symbol. And then I was looking further. Let me find my little pointer again. And for some reason, and I don't know if you can see it, you probably can't there, up there in the top right-hand corner, it says the Giza update. And I've dated this chart the 18th of June this year. So, just before the winter solstice or the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. And I just wanted, and I couldn't help but notice. So I'd been looking. Now I should say to you, the chart in the middle is the original equinox, cast from Luxor. And this Giza update I've done from Cairo. Now, what happens when you have two charts is that I'm going to compare the inside circle to the outside circle. Now, because it's only a matter of months, all the outer planets will be the same, but some of the inner planets will change. So there's the sun. Started out 0 degrees Aries, and on the 18th of June, it arrives at Betelgeuse, the fixed star associated with success and the ascendant of the equinox chart. So I look at that and I say, okay, well, things that are inaugurated, and this could be Egypt or anywhere else in the world, will come to fruition in the middle of June. Well, that's the first thing I noticed. Then I noticed something else. The planet Mercury, there it is there, has travelled and is now down here in the 17th degree of Cancer. And I suddenly realised, hang on a minute, Mercury's arrived at the fixed star Sirius. So we have the fixed star Sirius, which was very fortunate and associated with the flooding of the Nile for the ancient Egyptians. Mercury, Thoth, is arriving at that position in the middle of June, actually a couple of days before the 18th, around the 16th. And one of the things that happens when the fixed star Sirius is activated is that one has to pay attention to the small actions, because they can lead to great consequences. And not only is Thoth Mercury on Sirius, but also on the fixed star Canopus, which is in the constellation Argo, and is associated with navigating new ways and methods, finding one's way forward. So it says here, mind your step, small actions have big consequences, and navigate your way forward and bring hope. Okay, but then I noticed something else. The planet Mars, where is it in the birth? There's Mars in the equinox chart, which was problematic, and we spoke about it having a nationalistic tendency. By the time we get to the middle of June, Mars is down here in 0 degrees Virgo. Now, the last degree of Leo, and actually the first degree of Virgo, is associated with another one of the archangelic stars, Regulus. Yeah? And Regulus is to do with royalty and success, with a warning that if you use revenge, then there will be a great downfall. Yeah. So we have this alignment happening in June, associated with Betelgeuse, with Sirius, with Canopus, with Regulus, and then we have one that is there for all of 2025, and that's Pluto, sitting in this early 3 degrees of Aquarius. And the second degree of Aquarius is associated with the fixed star Altair, the eagle, early in Aquarius. And the eagle's mythology is to do with the courage to proceed, but a warning against aggressive action. Yeah. So we have two things that are warnings. Pluto is saying, be careful not to be aggressive, yeah, and find the courage to proceed. And Mars is saying to us, great success if you refuse to enter into the energy of revenge. Now, I don't know whether this is a message. I'm certain this is not a message just for the Egyptians, because we have politicians behaving badly everywhere and a great deal of revenge going on. And yet we have these three archangelic stars and Betelgeuse, which is a second magnitude star. So it's a bit like the holy ones have 4 torches and they're shining them down upon humanity, and some of them very specifically around Egypt, in June. So I just found that quite interesting. And I wonder if Zachary wants to comment on any of that.
We'll see what happens in June.
See what happens in June. Okay. Yep. All right. Oops, I've gone too far. So that's what I was just telling you about. Success without complications, the end of Gemini. Great success if revenge is avoided, that's Regulus. Small actions leading to large consequences. Navigating new ways forward. And a 2025, and in fact until early 2026, a warning to humanity saying proceed courageously, but do not act aggressively. Okay. All right. So we know in the Giza Plateau we have the 3 pyramids. We have Khafre, the middle pyramid, Khufu, the Great Pyramid, and Menkaure, I assume that's how you say it, the smaller or the lesser pyramid. And of course, this is the triplicity. We have Osiris and Isis and Horus. We have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in the tradition. So we have the triplicity everywhere. And here's the triplicity larger than life in the Giza Plateau. One would assume inaugurated and under the blessings and auspices of the Flame Lords and Ladies, the Venusians, the Syrian hierarchy, anchored there at least 10,500 years before the birth of Christ, possibly earlier. Yeah. And then I was fiddling around on my computer looking for pictures of pyramids, and I came upon this one. And I thought, oh, gee, that looks a bit like triangles with wings. Yeah, and Venus in the equinox chart, the Sabian symbol was a triangle with wings. And I did see something recently this last week, and I think it might have been something that the Chinese have devised, something that looked like a spaceship that was to hover around and repair things. And so I thought, oh, well, humanity are beginning to build flying machines that are based on the shape of birds. And of course, this brings to mind the ancient technology to me. Okay, so one of the myths, and there are many myths associated with the middle pyramid. And one of them is that this is the burial site of Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes, and that Hermes is buried there with the emerald tablet upon his heart chakra in the middle of the Hall of Records, also known as the Halls of Amenti. Now, this is very intriguing, and of course the Egyptologists who had spoken and immersed themselves in the art and the religion and the culture and the esoteric, they know this. But then we have the archaeologists who don't think along these lines. Yeah? So on some level, one might say, are we looking for the emerald tablet? Are we looking for the Hall of Records? So that's right, yes. Okay, so here's one of the architecturally designed views of the three pyramids, the Trinity, and it was this causeway. Now, let me find the little pen again. No, it's not it, Chandra. That's the one. There's the causeway there. That was the causeway that I saw the procession up to. And of course, we have the emerald tablet, which holds the wisdom. And we did, in the Diamond Light Healing, we've done a bit of work with the emerald tablet and alchemy. And the ancient alchemy is the code for living life that Thoth Hermes gave us. And why isn't my picture working? There it is. There's Thoth Hermes. And another one of the interesting things that I have read about, which was, I think it's kind of like what Srikiti was saying, things were falling into place for me. I've always known about Uazit, and Uazit is the great serpent woman. She is here. And she's one of the faces of the Lady Isis. But what I didn't know, or maybe I'd seen it in modern movies, but I hadn't connected it to ancient Egypt, was that the mythology goes that Uazit resides in the Hall of Records, and she protects the mummy of Thoth Hermes and the emerald tablet from pyramid raiders. Yeah, and that those who approach and attempt to get into this holiest of holies, the most sacred place under Khafre's pyramid, will be struck dead with Uazit, who is the great serpent mother. And I've always known about her, but I didn't know that particular story. And this is a lovely image over here on the right of Thoth with the ankh and the eye and the sacred bird, and, you know, so much symbology. And I think if you're interested in symbology, the more you look, the more you see. Another part of the story, and I'll just rub out that little mark that I've left there. Another part of the story associated with the Sphinx, she's known as the Mother of Mysteries, is that entry to the passageway that leads to the Hall of Records is under one of her front paws. But that if she's disturbed by the wrong people for the wrong reason, then out comes Uazit the serpent. Yeah? So I just find it beautiful, the stories, the mythology, which I don't have any doubt are anchored in truth. I found this image here of the Temple of Hathor, and I particularly liked it because so many of the temples that I went into down in the Valley of the Kings, I think particularly of, they go down. You get this sense of going down deeper and deeper and deeper. And they're most exquisite places to enter into. And of course, as I said, I have a particular connection with Anubis and the funerary rites that were there, the deep religious work that happened to prepare the pharaohs for the other world. Now, esoterically, as astrologers, when we think of the Sphinx, there's a connection between the head of the lion and the body of the human, the Leo and the Virgo. And it is said that back in ancient times, there were not 12 signs of the zodiac, but in fact only 10, and Leo and Virgo came later. But when did they come? Did they come after 10,500 BC? Who knows? And then, of course, the fixed star Sirius, that's connected to the Sirian hierarchy, has as its motif a lion. Yeah? So there's messages there that the Sirian hierarchy have this connection into the Sphinx and the Giza Plateau, and they appear to want to merge with humanity. And as I said, Great Mother, Serpent Mother Uwazit, who's also known as Isis Thermotis. She's the guardian of the Hall of Records, of the Halls of Amentes, and a mysterious Hierophant. And the wonderful signs. And of course, you see, another thing to think about is we are entering to the age of Aquarius, and astrologically, the signs work in pairs. And so you can't think about, an esoteric astrologer can't think about Aquarius without reflecting upon Leo. Yeah? And we can't think about Pisces, the age we're leaving, without thinking about Virgo. And the equinox chart had all that Pisces in it. Yeah. So there's just this sort of various connections that I make. And you know, the motif for Virgo is triple, you know, and there are hidden mysteries hidden. And esoterically, Virgo is associated with the sacred feminine and the sacred earth. Yes. All right. So what is it that lies beneath? Well, the Italian scientists have been working with something called the SAR technology, the satellite-based synthetic aperture radar scans. I've read a little bit about it, and I don't have the right brain to keep it all bedded down, not being a traditional scientist as such. But as I understand it, it's connected to, they use a microwave frequency from craft above, hundreds of kilometers above the earth. And this is partly what's caused such furor, is that there's a particular man whose name I can't remember, who's in charge of an Egyptian man who's in charge of the archaeological site of the Giza Plateau, and he wasn't.
His name is Hawass.
What's his name?
I think his surname is Hawass. I think his first name is Zahi or something with Zawi.
That's with
Zawi Hawass. He's a real dictator. He's a real fascist.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, he doesn't permit anyone in who doesn't toe the traditional archaeological line. So, yeah, it's a shocking situation, really.
Yes, and the archaeologists who are embedded in the esoteric have been virtually cast out and banned, and none of them seem to have a good word to say. And he seems to be extremely possessive of the keys to the Giza Plateau, and they've gone around him because they've taken these photographs or these scans from above the earth, and nobody's asked his permission. And you know, they say that somewhere in the next week there will be a more complete dissertation for the general public on the findings from these people from the University of Pisa, but it hasn't been peer reviewed. And so from the scientist perspective, they're all throwing mud at it because it hasn't been peer reviewed yet.
They will attack it viciously,
Yes.
because these discoveries basically rip to shreds the theory. It's only a theory, it's a belief, only a belief.
Yep.
Which has been presented to us as fact, which is certainly not, that the 3 pyramids of Giza are actually burial chambers, which they are not.
No, that's
and
right.
Never were.
Yeah.
But they hate that, and they will attack this finding viciously to try to confirm to the dumbed down conditioned masses that their view, their original view, that these pyramids were burial chambers, is actually correct. And these guys from Pisa who discovered this stuff are just airheads, fairy heads. You can expect it. Expect it. Right. You can bet the house on it.
Yep. And I'm reminded of the warning about revenge, you know, with the fixed star Regulus. and this is where Mars has arrived, will arrive at the fixed star Regulus by the middle of June. And we don't want to see revenge anywhere because dire consequences. And of course, Regulus is associated with royalty. And so here we're talking about the scientists who consider themselves the modern Egyptian royalty. And they've got these upstarts from the University of Pisa who've come along. And according to the scans, they believe that there are internal chambers and 8 pillars that go down 2 kilometres and a whole network that connects all 3 pyramids and no doubt the Sphinx. And so the question remains, to what purpose was this created and by whom? Well, we know that it was the Atlanteans who created it, and the purpose, and this is way beyond any of the modern Egyptians. So there's an image of the radar and the scan. Now, I don't know if that's an artist's impression or actual one. It looks a bit like an artist's impression to me, but anyway, that was what I'd found. And of all the various drawings, this was the one that somehow or other seemed to speak to me the strongest. I don't know why. Some of them just looked a bit too artistic. This one seems to have coils, yeah, but I don't know. You can't see the 8 pillars there, but 2 kilometres is a long way down. Here's some of the scans. Yeah. And of course, as I said, I've tried to read the scientific interpretation of these, and my brain can't hold it because I haven't been involved in it. But I think it would be very useful to listen to the conference, the press conference, because they're having another one, and they're saying it'll be in the next week or so. So these are the various impressions that artists have come up with, what might be underneath. And you could say that they're all a little futuristic, but you know, and there's a picture of Andrew Collins on his way, and I think that was about 2 years ago. And his YouTube website's called megalithomania.co.uk. And he's very well reputed and has been doing it for decades. And he's there going down into what they call the cave of the birds. And the cave of the birds was so called because there were very, very large statues, a bit like what Srikiri was saying about experiences of large beings. Well, there were statues of very large birds that were found in this cave system. And I think it was Andrew Collins who was saying it looks like the water's been in here and eroded it all, which reminded me of the catastrophe 10,500 years ago, which incidentally is connected to Nibiru and the greatest earth changes in the Eastern Mediterranean, and the flooding of the Nile and the destruction effectively of well, that was the middle kingdom, I think, not the ancient, not the old kingdom. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure that I'd go down there with just a little torch, because Andrew and his friend had a couple of torches, that was all. And they talked about the bats that were living there. And then, of course, there's you as it as well. Okay, now this next image I wanted to show you. When I was doing some researching in the last week about the scans that they're using, I realised that they'd been doing it since about 2007. And for some reason, I started looking up when was the last solar eclipse in Egypt and when will be the next one. And I discovered that there was a solar eclipse on the border between Libya and Egypt that went right across Cairo on the 29th of March 2006. And it was the following year that the development of this SAR technology, where they began to scan. And initially this technology was used for things like earthquakes, but it's progressed a great deal in the last 15 years. So I thought, isn't that interesting? There was an eclipse right in the region, not right over the Giza Plateau, but the path of Umbra went across Giza. And within 12 months, they start exploring. And here we are, what is that, 15 years later, 17 years later or something. Okay, so who were the ancients? Were they Atlanteans? Were they Syrians? Were they the Ananuka from Nibiru? Who were they? And what was the technology they had? Well, this is what maybe if the Pisa scientists are allowed to continue their work, they will reveal more. Maybe there will be more revelations that will come about on a mystical level through meditations of such sort. There's just a couple of images there that identifies this connection with the pyramids and the constellations. Orion, associated with the god of the ancient Egyptians, and Orion being very strongly connected to Betelgeuse and that fixed star and the equinox chart. And of course, the other ones, Sirius, that I said is being activated. I think it was the Lord DK who said that somewhere in the future, humanity will the month of August will be a month of ceremonies revering Sirius. Yeah, and anyway, I think we know so little about Sirius, but more will be revealed. But we know esoterically that Sirius is very strongly connected to the disciples of the world, the way the Pleiades is connected to ordinary humanity, and the way the Great Bear is connected to the initiates. And really the only way that humanity is going to pull themselves out of the hole that we've fallen into is if those who have soul contact and who are actively working on behalf of their souls for the hierarchy go about working with the energy of goodness and love and truth and hope. And somehow or other that's all connected to Sirius. And Draco's in there too. And of course these drawings, because I think to my understanding, there hasn't been much investigation of the Middle Pyramid. The focus has been upon the Great Pyramid. But there is one school of thought that says, hang on a minute, maybe the Great Pyramid is younger than the Middle Pyramid. Maybe the Middle Pyramid was the prototype built possibly centuries earlier. So some of the archaeologists have that school of thought. Yeah, it's a lovely image by Peter Fitch with the winged motif of Isis and what looks like a spiraling central spiritual sun above the three pyramids and above the Mother of Mysteries, and with the left and the right eyes. Beautiful image. And the pillars of wisdom on either side, and the blue stars all over the horizon, all over the sky. There's an image of, I found that somewhere, and there are various postulations around what will be the new ways of working with light and sound, and everything that's old is new again, and we don't necessarily know or remember the high points of the Atlantean civilization and how they were able to work with light and sound. But it seems to me that the holographs of light and sound must have been involved in some way in the past and will be involved in the future. So I look at this particular image and I go, I don't think it's too far from the truth. Yeah. And we have stylized images of the Anunnaki, who have a connection into Nibiru and the ancient Mesopotamian cultures and the Persian traditions. And I think the person to speak about this would be Zachary. Whatever it is you feel inclined to say about this, Zachary, would be most welcome.
Speak about Nibiru.
Pardon?
Well, that's a vast subject that it would take all a long, long time. We don't have that sort of time. Maybe if in a future presentation I can give a brief overview, because it really takes some hours to
Yes.
explain, and it's also complicated because there's been a massive cover-up orchestrated by the authorities, by the scientific community, by governments, about the subject of Nibiru, to claim it's just a fantasy, it's just nonsense, whatever, which is not the case. But to really talk about it in any detail which would make any sense, that would take a long time. I'm sorry. So I don't think tonight's the appropriate time.
Uh-huh.
I would like, I'm just looking at the internet from my other computer, and here's an article from March 23rd, just a few days ago, in relation to Zahi Hawass. And it's, quote, recent reports circulating on social media about the supposed discovery of a vast hidden network of chambers and tunnels beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza have been categorically denied by Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities. The archaeologist said the claims were, quote, completely wrong, unquote, and lacking any scientific basis. He basically said that these discoveries were fake news.
What he means is he didn't approve them, but
yeah, that's right.
I think it was Andrew Collins. No, maybe it was one of the archaeologists I was listening to in the last week who said that he was summarily ejected out of the community and banned from going to the Giza Plateau after a certain discovery. And then lo and behold, after he'd been banned, and I think it was Andrew, was out for 15 or 20 years, then in came that guy you're talking about, who then claimed the discoveries as his own. And that's his trademark. He gets rid of people and then he goes in afterwards and then he discovers it and he's the one in charge. So it will be very interesting to see, but there'll be a lot of power machinations going on.
Well, the battle is on, basically. The battle is on between the traditionalists who, as mentioned, claim that the pyramids were burial chambers, and these discoveries completely rip that to shreds. But it's interesting, this article says, despite the lack of scientific substantiation, the researchers' claims, that's Biondi and Malaga, the two Italians, the researchers' claims rapidly went viral on social media, racking up millions of views and shares. So the authorities, the powers that be, know that the cat is out of the bag.
Yep. And
they're trying to put it back in the bag by denying the validity of the research, which they really can't do. So it's just another instance of the establishment, the powers that be, trying to poo-poo the truth and continue to spread the lies and misinformation and crap, which they've been doing for decades, if not centuries.
Yep. And the interesting thing is that it was released on social media first, by a particular guy who I've since been communicating with, who couldn't believe his luck. He's someone who's been deeply involved with the Italian researchers over the last decade or so, and they told him, yes, go ahead, you can release it. So it didn't come out through mainstream media. So mainstream media are playing catch up.
Well, mainstream media is not even reporting this discovery. I only learned about it like about 2 weeks after. I think it was mid-March, around the 15th, that it came out. Yeah. I only learned about it by looking at the Zeta Talk post. It was not reported in the mainstream, at least not here. I don't know about other media.
No. Well,
so they're basically trying to deny it's even been reported.
Yep.
Which shows you how corrupt and totally degenerate they've become.
Yeah, it hit social media on the 20th, and I don't know why it didn't go anywhere from the 15th to the 20th. Yeah, and it's literally been in the last few days that they've started the mudslinging very dramatically. And it's sort of not helped by the people who haven't been seriously involved in the field for decades. So what I'll do is take the slideshow and make it into a PDF, and I'll post it on my website, and you can follow some of the various links, because there are some really very reputable Egyptologists who know what they're talking about. And for them, a lot of it's just pieces of the puzzle for